I'm telling you what, I'm hearing the Pence just caved.
No.
Is that true?
I didn't.
I'm hearing reports that Pence caved.
No
I'm
way.
telling you, if Pence caved, we're gonna drag motherfuckers through the streets. You fucking politicians are gonna get fucking drugged through the streets.
Yeah.
Because we're not gonna have our fucking shit stolen. We're not gonna have our election, our country stolen. If we find out you politicians voted for it, we're gonna drag your fucking ass through the street. Because this is the second fucking revolution. So let me find out, Pence. Let me find out myself that you treason the country. We'll fucking drag your ass too.
Cut the freaking head off!
Cut their head off!
You can do it!
You do the right thing or we're gonna force you to do the right thing.
Oh, I thought that we would begin the show with an ordinary citizen involved in legitimate political discourse, which is what hopefully we will have here. If that was legitimate political discourse, then 9/11 was legitimate international Middle Eastern diplomacy. Of course it wasn't. And all of that is related to my first topic on the show today. But before I get to that, this is our second round. Thank you so much for joining me again for this Richard Bey Talk podcast with Albert Reinoso.
Hello.
Producer extraordinaire.
Okay.
He worked with me on Sirius XM, and he's the guy that's been prodding me for at least 2 years. You've got to do a podcast. Why don't you do a podcast? You're so lazy. Go do a podcast.
I never said you were lazy.
Well,
Never did.
well, you said let's get to it. Right.
And nor am I the only person who said do a podcast. Everybody's told you that.
But you're the only person who could facilitate a podcast for me as a producer.
That's true.
All right. So thank you, Albert, for
You're
that.
welcome.
So anyway, that clip and the big lie and Michael Flynn saying that COVID was an international conspiracy, that the virus was created originally by the elites of the world, by this Illuminati or this connection, so that Donald Trump would lose the election in 2020. Now, there are many people who call this gaslighting, which I think is entirely inappropriate. Gaslighting comes from what was originally a play and then a movie, and the movie was Charles Boyer, I think, and he's trying to convince his wife that she's going insane. And that's what gaslighting it is. It's manipulating reality so that you will question your own sanity. Now, when I see that guy, and when I hear Michael Flynn, and when I hear Donald Trump, talk about, I don't know, everything from Clorox to the big lie to the states where more people voted than even existed, I don't question my sanity. I question their sanity. What this is a very American phenomenon. It's called bullshit. Bullshit is what I'd like to talk about. And yes, I am a student of bullshit. I read this book on bullshit by Professor Harry G. Frankfurt. Now, he is a philosophy professor emeritus at Princeton University. And, it's not a big book, but he does quote philosophers like Wittgenstein and St. Augustine and poets like Longfellow to probe the meaning of bullshit and the effect it has on our society. In fact, this book on bullshit is in my library right next to this book, Assholes, A Theory of Donald Trump. Because, and this book is written by a philosophy professor at the University of California. So there you go. That's in my library. And Donald Trump, of course, has achieved a level as a bullshit artist. Well, a bullshitter, that we call him a bullshit artist. I mean, is there anything else? Do we call somebody a lying artist? No, there's an artistry to bullshit. And the bullshit is not lying. It's not deception. It's not humbug. When a liar knows that he's giving you incorrect information, he knows that he's not telling you the truth. A bullshitter doesn't care if he's telling you the truth or not. And sometimes even the truth. He'll throw some truth in and then some bullshit and then some truth, because his goal is to get what he wants. His goal is to achieve a purpose. That's what a bullshitter does. And it has a certain kind of bluffing amount to it. It's a way of getting over, as we used to say on the street. And, in the 1920s, they called it the Roaring 20s. The 60s were called the Swinging 60s. But the proliferation of bullshit in this decade is extraordinary. They're going to have to call this the bullshitting 20s. And there's an epidemic of bullshit, and there is no vaccine for it. And yet, it's not a word that we can use in the mainstream media, or we're not supposed to. Let me tell you, I was on WABC radio, and it was 1 a.m. in the morning, and on Frank Morano's show, Frank is a friend of mine, and he had set me up to debate a Republican publicist. And one thing after another that she was saying was bullshit. So at one point she said that during the riots in Kenosha and Minneapolis and in Portland, Joe Biden was silent. He never criticized the rioters. He never decried what was going on. He had an implicit endorsement of what was going on. Now, as Albert knows, and he always makes fun of me because I used to come into the radio show with a sheaf of papers this high. I tend to over-research. And I had 4, right, Albert?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. But I had lined up already all sorts of things on my computer screen while we were talking. And one of them were 4 different times that Joe Biden did criticize rioters, did say it was deplorable, did say that it had to stop. I had the dates, I had the times, I had the months, and the circumstances in which he went after rioters. So when she initially said this, before I went into the substantiation, I just went, "That's bullshit." And there was dead silence. It was like Grandpa emitting a big fart at the Thanksgiving dinner. And everybody goes. And I said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Oh, you can't say that word on the radio." I said, "It's 1 o'clock in the morning. What, the little kiddies are going to be up and, have their ears, made dirty by that comment?" But, eventually like Joe Rogan, who I'll talk about in a little while, I did apologize for using the word and said I wouldn't use it again. And then in the following weeks, I heard Lindsey Graham use the word twice on the Sunday morning shows. And about a week ago, maybe you saw it if you watch Anderson Cooper, he actually said the word batshit on the air. He was referring to some kind of to some comment that either Trump had made or Michael Flynn or Jim Jordan or any one of the other lunatics. And he quickly apologized for it. But according to Professor Frankfurt, bullshit is an American word. We should be proud of it. There is no word in foreign vocabularies that is correlative to bullshit. And as I said, we live in an age where it's proliferating and we're buried in it. And the fact that you can't use this uniquely American term to describe what's going on, you have to use something like gaslighting. This isn't, when I think of gaslighting, I don't know. It just sets off in my mind little kids who are lighting farts. Whoa, sorry, they're lighting farts with a match or a cigarette lighter. But it really refers to making you question your sanity. But when I hear bullshit, I don't question my sanity. I go to the facts. And if there is any vaccine against bullshit, it is coming up with the facts and using them, as many as you can find, and then laying a booster of facts upon it. Of course, there's some people who don't want to listen to facts at all, and there's some people who don't want to take the COVID vaccine too. But at least you've made an effort to go against it. So bullshit, not an acceptable word, but a purely American word. And there's another word. I can't think of anything else. It is the only word in America that is verboten. You cannot say it. You cannot say it on television. You cannot say it in public conversation. People will blanch when they hear it, but especially if you're a white person. And that is the N-word. Now, in 2012, CNN and ORC had a poll, a national poll, and they found that 1/3 of white Americans used this word, even though it was forbidden, and that even a larger percentage of Black Americans had used the word. Now, why did Joe Rogan use this word in his podcasts 24 times in 23 episodes? And why did Spotify just suddenly find out about this? You pay a guy $100 million and you don't even have an intern sit down and say, hey, would you screen his podcasts and find out what's going on? We're spending $100 million. If you bought a house, would you say, oh, we don't have to have an inspection. I'll just buy it for $100 million. If you were buying a car, you wouldn't take it to your mechanic to examine it and see what you're actually getting for your money. But Spotify seems to have been in the dark as to what was going on in Joe Rogan's podcast. Now, I have to admit, I have not heard a Joe Rogan podcast. I have heard excerpts, and even his prolific use of the N-word, he claims were taken out of context, but he has apologized. By the way, Donald Trump, because this is such a very important issue, has spoken out on it and says, Joe Rogan, don't you apologize anymore. That's a sign of weakness. You shouldn't be apologizing for using the N-word. Meanwhile, I'm always scratching my... Donald Trump, have you heard him say anything about Putin and Ukraine? I mean, this is the top of the news for the last 3 weeks. This is the big story. And there are people who think Biden is being strong, and there are people who criticize him. Donald Trump won't open his yapper about it. I guess we can figure out why. Just go back to the humiliation in Helsinki. He doesn't want to offend Putin. He doesn't want to be on Putin's bad side. Perhaps Putin has something on Trump, and Trump knows it. But no, I haven't heard one newscaster remark that it's strange that Trump hasn't spoken about Ukraine and Putin and what's going on, and even Biden's reaction and NATO's reaction to all of this. But he does have find time to talk about Joe Rogan. Now, my original question was, why did Joe Rogan do this? So let me tell you a personal story. My son Kyle was about 8 years old, and his uncle had been playing for him Lil Wayne and Project Pete, rap albums. So one day he used the N-word while we were in a car traveling from New Jersey to Manhattan. We were going through the Lincoln Tunnel. I thought, oh, this is fortuitous. I could tell him about Abraham Lincoln, and then I could tell him about slavery. And I told him, when you use that word, you are taking the humanity away from the person that you're talking about. And that's exactly what they did in slavery. Black people were not human beings. They were beasts of burden. They worked, they didn't get paid. They could be bought and sold. The mother could be bought by one guy and the child sold to another. They had no human rights and were basically seen as animals. If they got sick on a slave ship coming from Africa, they would just dump the body over the side. And I said, when you use that word, you're stripping black people of their humanity. And in my opinion, that's worse than even taking somebody's life. So, about a week later, we're driving in my car through Lincoln Center. And I'm listening to my favorite Beatles song, which is I Am the Eggman by John Lennon. And there is a line where he says, boy, you've been a dirty girl, you let your knickers down. And Kyle goes, he said the word. And then he said nada. He said the N-word. He said it. I said, no, Kyle. He said knickers. He goes, what's knickers? I said, knickers is an English expression for underwear. So he said, oh, so it's all right to say knickers? And I said, yeah, you could say knickers. He rolls down the window in the middle of Midtown Manhattan and starts screaming out the window, knickers, knickers, knickers. I had to grab him and pull. No, don't do that, Kyle. Somebody will not understand the distinction. And in my opinion, although, I haven't, like I said, I haven't heard a lot of Joe Rogan, but I think Joe Rogan, to some extent, it seems to me from the things that he says them because it's sort of a, look at me, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And he's very successful. He has that $100 million contract. He has 3 million listeners. But there's that sort of attitude that you also find in the anti-vaxxers. It's not so much the vaccine. It's not so much anything, racist even in the words, but there's an attitude, a childish attitude. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to say knickers, and whether he should be taken off the air or apologize, and Trump says he shouldn't apologize, is a different matter. But I don't understand what is you'll find people say from time to time, white people, how come the blacks can say it and I can't? Well, there's a good reason for that. But why do you want to say it? What is, other than racial hatred, what would be the desire of a white person to use the N-word in its entirety? Now, I can think of a few reasons that it could be used. One is if there's a fictional account of 19th century slavery or Jim Crow. I mean, it takes me out of a movie or a television show when you see the slave owner goes, oh, get these blacks out there. Because that's not what the term they used. Even Mark Twain, when he used the N-word in its entirety to talk about Jim and Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain wasn't a racist. Now, when he would report what other people said in other writings of his, he would put quotation marks around it to make it clear he was quoting somebody. And when he wrote in his personal correspondence, he always used the word Negro. But in his day, certainly that word was not a forbidden word. It may have been frowned upon in certain quarters, but it wasn't the forbidden word that it is now. Even Obama, after Charlestown, the woman that was killed in Charlestown, Obama made a speech and he said, and he used the N-word in its entirety. He said, just because people don't use the N-word in its entirety in conversation anymore, it doesn't mean that we've overcome racism. So, and I don't think people made a big deal out of Obama using the word in that context. On the other hand, I can't see the reason why somebody would insist upon using it. And I can't understand why Spotify, shelling out $100 million, didn't at least get an intern to go and transcribe his old podcasts so they would know what they were buying. Go buy a house? Yeah. There are termites in the wood. And if you don't check, that's your problem. You bought it. It's yours. All right. So in keeping with that, I've looked over some of my old broadcasts. And over time, at the end of every one of these podcasts, I'll play something from an old broadcast. Some of it from the crazy, wild and silly and satirical Richard Bey Show, which was the last show that I did. Some perhaps commentary on WABC radio, and others from what I consider the best show I ever did, which is PAT. People Are Talking at WWOR-TV. And that's where this clip comes from today. But as I looked over my old shows, what really struck me is how little has changed. The same topics, the same controversies are on the front page today, are some of the issues that we're debating today. Do you know, when I first auditioned for a talk show, you know what the topic was? Book burning and library censorship. We're still talking about it. Homelessness. I had Billy Boggs. I don't know if you remember, Billy Boggs was a New York homeless woman who won a successful lawsuit with the ACLU so that she could choose to live on the streets. She was on the show. I'll play a clip from that later on. She was lucid, intelligent, but she was also on her meds. But we're still talking about homelessness all the time. Of course, race is a perennial topic. Riots? Back then we had shows on the riots in Crown Heights. In New York City, we had, a riot where people were killed. So the clip that I've chosen for today also has to do with race. And it has to do with a time when New Yorkers, once before, as they are now, were petrified by crime, by killings, by the breakdown of civil society. And that happened during the case of the Central Park jogger. Now, remember, the tabloid newspapers really played this up. Can you show that first? There you go. Wolf packs prey, female jogger near death after savage attack by roving gang. No, they weren't even kids. They were a wolf pack. They were animals. The next one, can we look at? Let's see. This is wilding. Park marauders call it wilding, and it's street slang for going berserk. 17 teens held in rape beating as victim clings to life. And the next one, can we say? This was Mayor Koch. Mayor Koch calls them monsters. Now, these kids hadn't been convicted of anything yet. And of course, that didn't stop Donald Trump from jumping into the fray. No, he won't say anything about Putin, but he certainly had something to say. He bought a full-page ad that ran in the newspapers where he wanted these kids to get the death penalty even before they were found guilty. Now, I have to shamefully admit that at the time, like most New Yorkers, I thought they were guilty. They had all confessed. There were gangs, a lot of gang violence in New York. There were, I don't know if the Bloods and the Crips were here. There was Omicron. It wasn't Omicron. What did they call themselves? There were all these strange names for gangs and slang that people used. And we did a show on this, on People Are Talking. Now, of course, years later, somebody confessed to the attack on the Central Park jogger. All of the kids that were so demonized, so stripped of their humanity, who suffered, some of them for over a decade in prison, were found not to be guilty. And perhaps when you watch this clip from that time, and I had to edit it way down, there were a lot of people in the audience who expressed their fears, and there were kind of racially tinged responses. But even the black members of my audience were very concerned about rising crimes and gangs. So this is like 9 minutes long. But let's take a trip back to New York City in June of 1989. The Central Park jogger on People Are Talking.
Welcome back to the second hour of People Are Talking. I'm Richard Bey. After they were arrested, the 8 accused assailants in the Central Park rape and beating were brought to their jail cells. The police reports say they showed no remorse. In fact, one of them said, "Hit the beat, let's go into a rap," and they sang this song. Wow. It's called Wild Thing, and the police described them as wild things, not even children, young adults, human beings. They said they acted like animals. They acted like animals, chasing a prey, dragging her down, beating her, pulling her off into a ravine. These were the same teenagers who some people described as decent, good kids, good students. These were the same teenagers who had parents who worked very hard so that their children could have a better life than they had had growing up. These were kids who grew up some of them in a building that had a doorman. They grew up in working class families, possibly lower working class families, but their parents did work and their parents did care and their parents were there. How could what some people see as decent, good kids turn into what the police call animals? Well, one explanation that at least the press had was something called wilding. It was a new word to many people in our area, but it's not a new form of entertainment for some members of inner city youth. Joining us right now are 3 young men who have had experience with gangs, either as gang members or knowing gang members, but certainly growing up in the inner city. Hugh Jilks is 17 years old. He was chased out of his own high school by one of New York's most notorious gangs, the Decepticons. You might not have heard of them, but people who go to school, students who go to school in the inner city, know that name very well and fear it. When he complained about the lack of security at his school, his principal told him he didn't have to come back. David Nieves has a cousin who's a Decepticon. Maybe you can put in a few good words for our other guest here today. He used to run what he calls a posse. They don't call it a gang. He decided enough was enough when he saw them beat a guy on a subway train with a hammer. How did you get in trouble with the Decepticons?
Well, it all started when they used to come up to our school. They used to ride the C train local, come up to various high schools, and just pick on people to pick with, to fight with, to rob them of their gold, try to talk to girls, do what they want to do because they know it was a lot of them. Nobody would try and stop them or fight back with them.
People afraid? You hear the name Decepticon, does it scare you or scare other people?
It doesn't scare me, but it scares other people.
Well, what happened to you? You had a run-in with them.
Okay. They came up to my school, my old school, Washington Irving High School, and they came inside the school, robbed people at their jury and everything, and they tried to beat up on my cousin. So what happened was, I fought back with my cousin, and then they told me they was going to get me because they knew me, because I knew where they lived, but they didn't know where I lived, so they put a contract out on me.
A contract to kill you?
To kill me.
How do you know that?
I found out through one of the guys that I know that is a Decepticon.
Do you think that they would carry it out?
If they ever found me, yes.
This thing wilding, had you ever heard that before?
Yes.
You heard the term?
Yes.
So it wasn't new to you. I mean, everybody said wilding, this is something new. The cops said it was new, the press said it was new, but it wasn't new to you. How would you describe wilding? What is it?
As a group of guys and girls, or just guys, going out, beating on people, doing what they wanted to do, because they knew there was so many of them that if the cops came or anything, they could just run and hide and blend in with the people because they was dressed regular.
All right, they don't always do it just to rob.
No, sometimes they do it just to do it.
Just to do it. For fun?
For fun or whatever.
David, you say on the street they don't call them gangs, right?
Yes.
What do they call it?
Gangs. It's posses.
Posses.
Yes.
You had a posse?
No, I didn't have a posse. I used to hang out with posses.
You hung out with a posse.
Yes.
It doesn't have a name like, the Jets or the Sharks, like in the old days of West Side Story, no?
No.
So you don't call yourselves anything. Is there any structure to a posse? Is there a president? Is there a leader? Is there
A posse could just be formed by two guys on a train going uptown, and they see guys they know, and then it just turns into something that vicious. Turns into something vicious at that stop.
It got too vicious for you.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, me and my cousin, we were with some guys. As we were on the train, more guys came that we knew, and we were walking through the subway cars, and they met up with a guy that happened to look and was like, wow, look at all these guys. And what happened where they might have took it wrong, so they started beating on the guy with hammers. Why are you looking at us? And
Hammers?
Yes.
They did real damage.
Yes.
This guy wasn't going to walk out of the train.
No.
How did you feel when you saw this? What were you doing?
I was like this. Stunned. I was stunned.
Do you get caught up in it at all?
No, I just got off the train right there. Got off the train right there.
But some kids do get caught up in it.
Yes.
Are they
It's
good
easy to
kids? Are
get
they
caught
normal
up in it.
kids? Are they like,
Normal kids, it's easy for a kid to get caught up in this. Easy. Very easy.
How is it easy for like a decent normal kid who has parents, who cares about him, and he goes to school and he might be doing well? How could he get caught up in something where he's bashing some guy with a hammer? I mean, obviously you had a sense of decency at this point to say, hey, this is enough. This is inhuman. So you walked off the train. How come other kids don't walk off the train?
You usually don't know you're caught up into it until it happens. Most of the kids don't say, like, the other kids didn't get off the train because they might have been taken as being weak. So they're going to get their kicks in to say, after all this happens, yeah, I got a piece in too, I got a piece in too.
What did you think when you heard about this incident in the park, the wilding? Was it a surprise?
No, it wasn't no surprise. It's not a surprise. These posses are getting out of hand in New York City. You're going to hear a lot more about this during the summer.
You tell me, because I got these, I don't have a posse. I'm the Lone Ranger, okay? But let me go through some of these terms. You tell me about them. Double G, G and G, what does that mean?
Golden girls.
Golden girls.
That's what we want. That's what they want.
Gold
That's what they would say. Yeah, that's what we want.
Let's go get the
Goals.
double G's, Golden
Yeah.
Girls.
Let's go get the double G's. Okay, how about yin-yanging? That mean anything?
Yin yang, talking.
Talking?
Popping a lot of junk.
You mean basically mouthing off
Right.
and bragging about stuff? Yellow and babes, that's the same thing? I mean
Same
anything?
thing as double G.
Same thing as double G. Wilding or Will Outen? Is Will Outen the same thing as wilding?
In the same sense, yes. Means chilling out, or if it gets too out of hand, doing the wrong thing.
See,
or the wild thing.
wilding is all about just getting loose, getting wild, doing whatever the hell you want to do. You see something you want, instead of being mellow and cool like you would normally be, let's get wilding, let's do it. And they go to it.
Welcome back. Many New Yorkers who aren't out on the streets for most of their day are learning a lot of new terms today. G and G and yellow and babes, yin-yanging, posses, wilding. Joining us right now are some people who have both sets of views, I guess, the view that happens on the street and maybe a view that they can communicate to the people who aren't on the street. Curtis Sliwa and his wife Lisa Sliwa have become household names in the metropolitan area as leaders of the Guardian Angels.
This is an annual event. You failed to mention it last Sunday was the walkathon up to Central Park.
And I never saw
That
so
was
many cops in my life out in
And that
Central
was the
Park.
gathering point for all the posses. They couldn't take advantage of all the black, Hispanic, white kids walking for the March of
Right.
Dimes, so they get on the subway and then they go vulturizing other parts of the city. The cops know about this every year. They need to break up those posses when they begin gathering up at Central
Thomas,
Park.
very quickly, you up for another show. I have a telephone call. Good morning, you're on the air.
That every one of those guys, especially the one in the red suit, did enough of his raping and did enough of his thing. Now he's trying to plead his innocence.
All right, wait, sir. Give me your question or your point in one sentence, will you?
Yes. Richard?
Yes, what's your point?
My point is, where do you come off to rip off some chick and beat the hell out of her, all right? And then find these people innocent, or they're going to be found innocent because they're underage.
Okay.
Mister, I think...
Time, Lisa.
One quick point, Richard. The danger is just with this caller that because of somebody's haircut or the color of their skin, there's going to be a lot of negative racial stereotypes. We have to balance that out so we see the positive things that young Black and Hispanic males are doing in our community, which we're not being told about.
Right.
Unfortunately, I've run out of time. We'll have to save this for another show. We'll be right back in just a moment. Stay with us.
I mean, you know, there was fear and confusion and apprehension in New York. But watching that clip, two things also leapt out at me that have nothing to do with the topicality of it. One of them is Curtis Lewa looking like a cherub. Curtis Lewa just ran for mayor, of course, and is, you know, one of the most well-known people in New York City. And the hairstyles on the girls. Could you see some of those girls with the hair all puffed up, right?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. All right. So anyway, we've come to the end of this number 2 podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll subscribe to us on all of the different formats you've seen on the bottom of the screen. I hope you'll tell your friends about it. And if this is on Facebook or somewhere where you can share the podcast, please feel free to share it with any of your friends that might be interested. So once again, we have come to the time where I say thank you for joining us and all my best. Take care.